Date at The Hague. Kenya's Deputy President William Ruto set for trial at the International Criminal Court. Unease in Bangui. Dozens are killed in fresh fighting in the Central African Republic. And claiming responsibility, an extremist Islamic group from Sinai says it is behind the failed assassination attempt of Egypt's Interior Minister. Welcome to Africa Live on CCTV News with me, Beatrice Marshall in Nairobi. Also coming up on the program, Somalia slashed funds. The Somalia government moves to clear its name over central bank funds. And jubilation in Addis Ababa as Ethiopia enters final round of World Cup qualifiers. We begin here in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi, where the country's Deputy President William Ruto is due to go on trial at the International Criminal Court on Tuesday. Deputy President Ruto is facing charges of crimes against humanity. The International Criminal Court says it plans to use his trial to send out what it calls a clear message. CCTV's Kofa Mrenje has more.
William Ruto prepares to fly to the Dutch capital, The Hague, for a trial many Kenyans thought would never come. The Vice President is accused of helping mastermind the violence that followed Kenya's 2007 elections. A former radio presenter, Joshua Arapsang, is due on trial with him. And in November, Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta will also make this journey, also to stand trial for crimes against humanity. All three maintain they're innocent, that the charges are politically motivated, and many of the witnesses against them have pulled out, terrified for their safety. But the chief prosecutor is confident in her case.
When the trial against Mr. William Ruto and Mr. Joshua Sang begin, we will present to the judges the evidence that we have gathered during our investigations. In doing so, we will not only be seeking to assist the judges to uncover the truth, but we will also be sending a clear message to would-be perpetrators that my office will relentlessly pursue anyone alleged to be responsible for the commission of such crimes.
Kenyatta's party last week voted through a motion in Parliament to pull Kenya out of the ICC. President Kenyatta previously has vowed to cooperate with the court, but over the weekend, he also raised the stakes.
They will not make it impossible for a sovereign nation to conduct its business. We must be allowed to conduct our business. And we have been willing from day one to cooperate, and we are still willing. But do not make it difficult for us to run the affairs of an independent sovereign nation called Kenya.
If the trials run as scheduled, Kenyatta and Ruto could be at The Hague at the same time for several weeks. Some Kenyans are worried about a power vacuum. The court's registrar says only the judges can decide whether both men should be there together. For now, the spotlight will be on William Ruto alone. Kofa Mrenje, CCTV, Nairobi, Kenya.
Well, many Kenyans remain traumatized more than 5 years on, and at least 1,300 people were killed in the violence, and some of their families have long given up on getting justice. CCTV's Robert Nagila has more.
I meet 36-year-old Felix Hatambi near his former home in Naivasha, about 100 kilometers west of the capital, Nairobi. It was here in early 2008 where one of the darkest chapters in Kenyan history was written. People had taken refuge in this compound, and a crowd trapped them and set it ablaze.
I later came to confirm about 36 people in total died here.
Julius, away at the time attending a relative's funeral, lost his wife and their 4 children in the fire.
I felt blood drain from my body. I thought I was going to die.
It's a very different scene now from what it was way back in 2008. By the time we got here, the structures had all been razed to the ground. There was smoldering debris all over this compound, and you could just make out the huddled bodies burnt together.
Now, children play here, oblivious to the tragedy. But their parents say they can't forget.
I can't sleep on my own. When the children go to visit their father on the weekends, I have to sleep at my neighbor's.
The attack on Naivasha was said to have been in revenge for a similar attack on a church in Eldoret, for which the International Criminal Court has blamed William Ruto. Felix Hatambi says he has forgiven those who killed his family.
In my heart, I have no bitterness with anyone. I can't tell you who did it anyway, because I was not here. I am at peace.
Powerful words from a man with a big heart. But while he may have forgiven, Hatambi can never forget. He still has nightmares. Robert Magela, CCTV, Naivasha, Kenya.
Well, let's remind ourselves now of the key moments leading up to Deputy President William Ruto's trial. In January of last year, the ICC confirmed charges alleging his involvement in the 2007 post-election violence, along with Uhuru Kenyatta, among others. In March this year, both men running on a joint ticket won the presidential election. On March the 30th, the Supreme Court of Kenya confirmed the election result was legitimate, and on the April the 9th, President Uhuru Kenyatta and his Deputy President Ruto formally took office. The International Criminal Court's prosecutor has suffered several setbacks after the withdrawal of a number of key witnesses. On September the 4th, members of parliament voted in an emergency session to revoke Kenya's ICC membership as opposition lawmakers walked out. The ICC responded to the vote by warning that the vote would not shield Ruto or Kenyatta from prosecution. Deputy President Ruto's trial is due to start on Tuesday at The Hague. Well, let's get more details and analysis on the ICC issue, and we're now joined in studio by Mr. Tom Maliti, who is a journalist with the ICC Monitor. Thank you very much for joining us here on Africa Live. Now, the trial of Deputy President William Ruto is due to start on Tuesday. The trial of President Uhuru Kenyatta will also start in September. What's the implication of those trials on Kenya?
Well, a key implication will be a psychological one, seeing a sitting deputy president appear before court and be asked to plead whether he's guilty or not to the crimes that the prosecutor alleges he was involved in. And then 2 months down the road, the same will apply to the president. This is unprecedented in Kenya. We have never had a situation where either the vice president, as the title used to be, or the president has been in a court, whatever kind of court, and has had to make a plea.
Well, the ICC has been losing support in Africa. I mean, support for the ICC across the continent is now waning, though. And many have said that the ICC process has been political rather than judicial. What is informing that lack of support?
Well, one of the things that's informing that lack of support is that the ICC is doing what it's supposed to do. The kind of crimes that the ICC was set up to deal and manage are crimes that involve people who are powerful and influential. And invariably that would lead to, politicians of high profile being brought before the court and being asked to answer to charges. And I think that's why the ICC is seen as political in that sense. As far as the waning support on the African continent, I think there's waning support for the ICC when it comes to trying heads of state or indicting heads of state, as is the case with Sudan's president. But in terms of other kinds of crimes or other kinds of individuals, African leaders by and large have said, look, we have no problem with the ICC trying, for instance, Congolese rebel leaders. But when it comes to presidents and deputy presidents, then they start hesitating. All
right. When it comes, though, to justice for the victims, in the Kenyan situation, it's now 5 years on. Is this really the beginning of justice for the victims?
It is possible that at the end of this process, which will take some years, some victims may get justice. And this is simply because the cases before the ICC refer to specific parts of Kenya where violence happened. However, the violence that happened in early 2008 covered many more parts of the country that are not part of the cases in the ICC. And therefore, for those victims who were affected one way or the other in other parts of the country that are not before the ICC right now, then they obviously will still be seeking justice, because the answer to the question as to what happens to the person who they believe is responsible for what happened to them, the violence, the displacement, the physical disablement and so on, remains unanswered. They will be seeking justice. They will still be asking questions about that.
All right, let's just go back briefly to Kenya's position, though. Kenya is, wants a vote on whether it should remain with the Rome Statute or withdraw from the Rome Statute. Kenya is going for a withdrawal from the Rome Statute here. What implication will that have, though, for the continent?
I don't know what the implications are for the continent. I think each African government will make its decision based on its own interests and not necessarily based on Kenya's interests. And to be specific, in Kenya, the parliament has passed a motion. The government has not yet acted on that motion. About 3 years ago, parliament passed a similar motion, and the government didn't act on that motion. So it's possible that now the government can also decide, look, parliament has made its statement, and we think that statement is strong enough. We don't need to follow through with formally withdrawing from the ICC. All
right, Tom Maliti, thank you very much for joining us here on Africa Live. We'll take a short break now on Africa Live, but still ahead on the program. Unease in Bangi, dozens are killed in fresh CAR fighting. And claiming responsibility, an extremist Islamic group from Sinai says it is behind the failed assassination attempt of Egypt's interior minister. Watching Africa Live on CCTV News with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. At least 60 people have been killed in fighting between rebels and forces loyal to ousted Central African Republic leader Francois Bozize. Now, this is according to government officials. The President Michel Djodotia's spokesman said fighters loyal to Bozize had attacked villages in the northwest of the capital. This is the first large-scale operation launched by the former president's forces since he was toppled in March. The United Nations has warned that the CAR could become a failed state, threatening the stability of the region. The Central African Republic has gold and diamond deposits, but has been unstable since independence. Michel Djodotia, who was sworn in as president early this month, has promised to relinquish power after elections scheduled for 2016. Talks between the Democratic Republic of Congo's government and the rebel group the M23, which were set to start in Uganda's capital Kampala, have been delayed. A spokesperson for the Ugandan government has told CCTV the delegation from Kinshasa is reportedly on its way. The rebel group's 12-man team is already in Kampala. Rene Abandi, who leads the delegation, says they should not lose more time. Regional leaders meeting in Kampala last week gave the parties a deadline of 14 days to reach a deal. At the Kampala talks, the two parties were urged to resolve their grievances politically to end months of hostilities that have left many dead and thousands displaced, mostly in the mineral-rich North Kivu province of the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo.
The delegation of the M23, the rebel group, arrived yesterday, the complete delegation. The delegation from the Kinshasa government has confirmed is on its way. We expect that by the end of today they would have arrived. So that gives us impetus. There is commitment on both sides.
Just already we are losing this first day because of the lack of a political will in the Kinshasa side. We were supposed already to begin today. Now we are losing 24 hours. For what? So if it continues like that, there will be less. There will not be enough. But If Kinshasa had to come with a commitment and a political will, I think it's enough. It was reasonable.
Well, let's shift to North Africa now, where an Al-Qaeda-linked group has claimed responsibility for a failed attempt to assassinate Egypt's interior minister in Cairo. Ansar Beit al-Maqdis is best known for blowing up gas pipelines in the Sinai. Now it is threatening more attacks. CCTV's Yasser Hakim has more.
Police have still to confirm the death toll from Thursday's bombing. But according to the Sinai militant group Ansar Beit al-Maqdis, one of the dead was a suicide bomber. The group blames Interior Minister Mohammed Ibrahim for the death of Islamist supporters of ousted President Mohammed Morsi, and it's threatening more bombings. Police have yet to make any arrests, but some are skeptical of the group's claim.
Why did they wait 5 days to claim responsibility? Police fear it could be an attempt to divert attention from the real assailants so that they could freely plan more attacks.
Ansar Beit al-Maqdis, which means Partisans of Jerusalem, is an established Palestinian group affiliated to Al-Qaeda. It is famous for bombing the gas pipelines in Sinai that supply Jordan and Israel, more than 10 times since 2011.
It is a dangerous militant group in northern Sinai. The group's members are mainly Arabs and foreigners. They are funded by arms, personnel and money through the tunnels on the border with Gaza, which the army is trying to destroy.
Morsi's ousting has led to a sharp increase in attacks in Sinai. Dozens of security forces members have been killed, and the military has now launched a major offensive against militants in the peninsula. The Partisans of Jerusalem's claimed assault on Mohammed Ibrahim is seen by analysts as an attempt to weaken the army's crackdown on militants in Sinai by opening new fronts in major cities like Cairo and Alexandria. Yasser Hakim for CCTV, Cairo.
You're watching Africa Live. Coming up, the African Union Day is marked across the continent. We ask, is the continental body changing with the times? And education for all. Somalia begins initiative to boost its children's access to formal learning. The African Union's been marking a special day. September the 9th is the 14th anniversary of the Sirte Declaration, and that's when heads of state meeting in Libya agreed to set up the African Union. 14 years on, the African Union is still facing major challenges, but it's also been tallying its successes. CCTV's Girum Chala with more details.
The African Union lists no fewer than 14 objectives, among them solidarity, peace, sustainable economic development and the promotion of human rights. For a continent with so many varied interests, the African Union has given itself an ambitious mission, and its leadership is the first to admit there is a lot of work.
It's work in progress. There are lots more things that we need to do. There are more kids at school now than there were before the OAU was formed. There are less children dying at birth, and all the indicators are falling. They've not reached where they should be, but the trend is the right trend.
Some critics say the African Union has still to grow into its role as a champion for Africa's people. Some cite its allegedly slow response to crises such as the Somali famine. Still, the AU can point to success in diplomacy. For example, its dogged pursuit of a peaceful solution to the crisis between Sudan and South Sudan. Its officials also believe AU policies are promoting economic development too.
In terms of economic growth and development, Africa is on the verge of turning the corner for sustainable development. The international environment has never more been conducive. Relying on Europe and America is no more a constraint.
The African Union also can cite its growing military success. Its force in Somalia has played a key role in establishing a new government after more than 2 decades of conflict. The AU also helped persuade the UN to send an aggressive African force into the DRC. So, 9th of September is a day to reflect for the African Union on how far it has made the objectives of its founders and how far it must still go. Grumjala, CCTV, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Well, let's now hear more from Irungu Houghton, who is an expert on African governance. Irungu, welcome to Africa Live, and thank you. Now, the African Union Day is being marked today. What is so special about this? So what are some of the key achievements that the African Union has had, let's say, over the last 1 year?
I think it's useful for maybe for the viewers to distinguish today, which is really the commemoration of the date which the CERT declaration was signed, creating the African Union, and what happened in May 25th, which was the 50th anniversary of Africa Day. And this particular day is an interesting one. I think over the last 1 year, depending on how you look at it, I tend to see the African Union more of a barometer rather than a thermometer, in the sense that I see the African Union, my expectation of the African Union is that it sets the standard and the temperature for the continent, rather than just reflecting what's happening. And I think in some ways I would say that I've been quite disappointed over the last year in terms of what has happened, and in other ways I think there's been some progress. The achievements, I think, are really to be felt in maybe 3 areas. In the area of conflict, we've seen Sudan, both Sudan and South Sudan find an agreement. We've seen also Somalia come through a very vicious, violent military war.
Right.
We've also seen a breakthrough in some smooth transitions. We saw the passing away of the leaders in Ghana and in Ethiopia, and this has all been very good for the continent. And I think another thing I would probably point to is the formation of the AU panel on illicit capital flows, which for many of us working in this area have been very concerned about. Something like $50 billion leaves the continent in really just illicit and criminal activities. And under the leadership of Thabo Mbeki, we now see some focus on this area. So these would be the big achievements, I think, that I would point to. There are some, I think, some failures and some weaknesses.
There's been some progress, as you mentioned there, but there have also been a number of political uprisings over the last 1 year. You know,
Absolutely.
DR Congo, in Eastern DR Congo, still ongoing. The uprisings in Egypt. Tunisia seems to be heading back in that direction again. How is the African Union, though, faring in conflict resolution?
I mean, in some ways, I tend to feel the African Union seems to always skate on water. You know, it's the more that they move, they may resolve 4 or 5 conflicts on this side, and then we see another 4 or 5 emerge. And maybe that's just the nature of the transition that Africa is going through, and this is the period in history that we find ourselves, that at any one time there will be 4 or 5 complex political emergencies that the AU has to respond to. I think the AU's response has been most felt where they've tried to ensure that there is an inclusive approach to conflict resolution. It is, I guess in many ways, looking at Egypt at the moment, if I take one of those conflicts, it is really important that the AU has continued to call for the Muslim Brotherhood to be included in the negotiations, much as the Egyptian government would like to have them banned and even removed from the political scene altogether. And I think that's the role of a regional institution.
All right. In the last 1 year as well, the African Union chairperson, the African Union Commission's chairperson, Dlamini Zuma, has taken over. What are some of the issues that are standing out in terms of a change in that area?
I mean, I think probably for me 2 areas where I had high expectation, and she had actually stated that this would be an important kind of area for her focus. One was on making the African Union Commission a much more efficient, much more inclusive, and much more visionary body. There has been a number of attempts to try and create new vision for the Commission and indeed for the African Union itself with a set of strategic plans. But from outside, it's not really clear how effective those plans have been in terms of changing the direction or even bringing the African Union down to a common set of 5 or 6 key issues in which they can develop competency in. So I think that's been an area that I'm still expecting to see a breakthrough. The other area really has been, I think, in the involvement of citizens. We hear, on one hand, a very wide, kind of a very loud commitment to a people-driven African Union, and on the other, just recently during the summit in May, we saw a number of non-governmental organizations actually be denied accreditation to the summit. And I think that's been very disappointing. I think going forward, it is the weight of the people of the continent, the 1 billion people rising, that really the African Union needs to lead. Rather than try and manage it as I guess a 20th century intergovernmental institution. So I would like to see much more citizen engagement.
All right, Irungu Houghton, thank you. We'll leave it there for the moment, but thank you for your insights. Well, let's now head to Madagascar, where the African Union's decision to lift sanctions has fueled hopes the island will soon be welcomed back into the international fold. The African Union says Madagascar is heading in the right direction. Elections have been scheduled for October the 25th, but whoever emerges victorious has a major challenge ahead of them. CCTV Celestine Caronet is in the capital Antananarivo and brings us more.
A philosophy lecture at Ankatso University in Antananarivo. The debate here is about perception. Reality for these students is rather more daunting.
Each year we have a strike here. Sometimes the teachers do not receive their salary, students do not get their scholarships, so we cannot fulfill our study until the end. I think it's terrible.
It's not just education that's a problem here. Agriculture, tourism and mining have all slowed in recent years.
Several factories have shut down. There are many unemployed people in the city. Insecurity is on the rise and laws are broken everywhere you look. The social fabric is disintegrating.
After the coup that toppled Ravalomanana in 2009, the African Union suspended Madagascar's membership and a string of sanctions were imposed. For many, it has been a state of limbo since then.
Bien entendu, people are tired and want some improvement and stability and legitimacy of government.
Aussi bien pour les Malgaches que ses partenaires, aussi bien. The AU last week lifted sanctions on more than 100 individuals, including current leader Andry Rajoelina. It's hoping the vote in October will end the political crisis here. But years of damage to the economy and society will take a lot longer to repair. The reality for this island is that the future is at best uncertain. Celestine Caronet, CCTV, in Antananarivo, Madagascar.
Well, let's now take a look at other stories making the headlines across the continent at this hour. Mali's President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta revealed his new cabinet on Sunday. It will be tasked with reviving the West African nation following a turbulent 18 months that saw a coup and a rebellion plunge its main gold exports into crisis. The announcement of the 34-member cabinet on state television follows last week's nomination of Umar Tatamli, a technocrat and senior official with the regional central bank, as Prime Minister. Keïta, who pledged to put technical competence ahead of party affiliation, included only one of the 22 first-round presidential candidates who supported him in the August 11th runoff. His cabinet replaces the transitional authority established to lead Mali to presidential elections. The elections were seen as a necessary step to restoring democratic order and unlocking billions of dollars in foreign aid. And to Nigeria now, where fresh clashes in the country's restive northeast on Sunday led to the killing of 5 Boko Haram Islamists and 13 fighters from a vigilante group, according to a state government official. Garba Ngamdu, an aide to the state governor, said members of the civilian militia responded to reports that the Islamist extremists were planning to attack the town of Benishek in Borno State, Boko Haram's stronghold. The insurgents arrived in the early hours of Sunday morning and a gunfight broke out, according to an account corroborated by several vigilante fighters. The military has applauded the emergence in recent months of civilian fighters describing them as a helpful tool which has boosted the military effort against Boko Haram. And finally, to Somalia, where a campaign aimed at bringing 1 million children to school started on Sunday. This came as the world marked the 48th International Literacy Day. The launching ceremony of the Go to School initiative was held in the capital city, Mogadishu. The initiative, launched by the Somali government with the support of international organizations, including UNICEF, seek to help 1/4 of Somalia's children who have had no access to education or have gone to school. The project includes the repairing and construction of school buildings and youth training facilities. It will also include training of teachers. Somali President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud, the representative of the United Nations International Children's Emergency Fund to Somalia, Sikandar Khan, and other officials attended the event. Well, let's now take a look at Africa's business at this hour with Penina Karibe. Penina.
Thank you, Beatrice.